My beloved, if you hear nothing else today, hear this: you are not failing when you choose to grow. You are not selfish when you choose to heal. And you are not unloving when you choose to let them go. There is a time to fight for people, yes, but there is also a time to surrender them, to place them at the feet of the one who knows what you do not, to trust that the same God who formed your heart can also carry theirs. You are not failing when you choose to grow. There is a quiet kind of courage that often goes unnoticed in this world. It's not the kind that shouts or demands attention. It doesn't come with applause or fanfare. It's the courage to rise up, to move forward, to step away from what no longer serves you, even when your heart still trembles from the thought of letting go. And somehow, we've been conditioned to believe that choosing ourselves, choosing peace, healing, growth, is selfish, that it's failure. But it isn't. Oh, no, it is one of the deepest, truest forms of wisdom. Growth is not loud. It doesn't always look like success from the outside. Sometimes growth means closing a door and sitting in silence. Sometimes it means distancing yourself from people who do not understand who you are becoming. Growth means choosing the unfamiliar over the comfortable, because somewhere deep inside, you know that comfort is costing you your spirit. There are moments in your life when everything in you knows that a chapter is ending, and yet you hesitate to turn the page. And yourself. When you choose to grow, you are honoring what God is doing within you. You are listening to the whisper of the Spirit, nudging you towards something higher, deeper, richer. And you may not be able to explain why the old ways no longer fit. You may not have the words to articulate why you can't keep pretending, or why the laughter feels forced, or why the conversations feel shallow. But your soul knows. You are not failing when you choose to no longer participate in what is wounding you. You are not failing when you step out of roles that required you to betray yourself. You are not failing when you stop proving your worth to people who cannot see your value. That is not weakness, that is growth. There are those who will question your decisions. They will point to what you walked away from and ask why you gave up. But they do not understand. You didn't give up. You grew up. You chose wholeness over approval. You chose alignment over attachment. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting for a version of life that keeps you bound in fear. Growth rarely feels good in the moment. It often comes with tension, loneliness, and doubt. But buried inside that discomfort is freedom, the kind that cannot be found when you keep shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, the kind that begins to emerge when you stop chasing peace through pleasing everyone around you. To grow is to step into responsibility for your own spirit. It is to say, I will no longer abandon myself just to keep others from feeling abandoned. It is the sacred shift from survival to purpose, from people-pleasing to God-trusting. It is the brave, holy decision to take your eyes off the approval of others and turn them inward, toward the work God is doing inside of you. Choosing to grow means choosing truth over tradition. It means no longer staying small just because that's what others expect. It means believing that the dreams God placed in your heart are worth protecting, worth nurturing, even if others don't understand them. Letting go is an act of faith, not selfishness. There is a deep and sacred work that happens in the heart when you learn to let go, not from anger, not from pride, but from clarity. When you finally see that holding on is no longer healing, no longer helping, no longer holy, you begin to understand that release is not rejection. It is reverence. Letting go is not a sign that you've stopped loving. It's a sign that you've started listening. Listening to the Spirit, listening to your soul, listening to the quiet voice inside you that says, this is not where you belong anymore. Letting go is not a betrayal of love. Real love does not chain, does not smother, does not demand you stay when you are not growing. Real love can let go with open hands, trusting that if something is meant by God, it will remain, not through force, but through faith. And yet so often, we are taught that to hold on is noble, that to let go is weakness. But it takes far more strength to release something than to grip it out of fear. There are moments when the Spirit calls you to walk away from what once felt safe, not because it was always harmful, but because it is no longer aligned with where you are called to go. And in those moments, it can feel like failure. It can feel like you're turning your back on something sacred. But what's truly sacred will never require you to sacrifice your peace, your voice, or your God-given identity. Letting go means trusting that God can be in the unraveling just much as in the building. It means believing that the same hands that brought you into something can also lead you out. You may not understand why certain people were part of your journey for only a season. You may not know why certain relationships, dreams, or roles faded out of your life. But letting go is your declaration of trust, that He knows what you do not, that He sees what you cannot, and that His plan is still unfolding. Sometimes we hold on because we confuse loyalty with love. But loyalty that leads you to betray yourself is not holy. If staying costs you your peace, your health, your purpose, then it is not selfless to remain. It is a quiet form of self-neglect. And no one is called to lose themselves to prove they are loving. Letting go is not abandonment. It is alignment. When you release what is no longer serving you, you are not quitting. You are not being cold. You are not closing your heart. You are clearing space. You are making room for the healing, the newness, the direction you've been praying for. So often we cry out to God for peace, but we hold on to the very things causing us pain. We ask for clarity, but we cling to confusion. We plead for joy, but we refuse to lay down the burdens that are stealing it from us. Letting go means you trust that you do not have to be in control to be secure. It means trusting that God's hands are stronger than yours. It is believing that you do not have to carry the weight of saving everyone, fixing everything, holding everything together. It is a release into divine timing, a surrender to holy wisdom, a step into freedom. To let go is to say, I am not the savior. It is to recognize the limits of your love and power, and to trust that what you release, God can still redeem. It is not the absence of care, but the presence of wisdom. It is what happens when you stop managing people's journeys and start tending to your own. When you stop forcing connections and begin honoring the flow of God's will. Letting go is an act of obedience, an act of maturity, and an act of deep trust. Is not selfish. It is spiritual. You can't carry your calling and their chaos too with your heart. There comes a point on the path of purpose when the weight of what you're carrying becomes too heavy, not because your calling is too big, but because you've taken on things that were never yours to hold. The calling on your life is holy, sacred, and intentional. It was designed specifically for you, crafted by the hands of a God who knows your every breath. But even the most anointed calling will feel unbearable when it is buried under the noise, the needs, and the dysfunction of those who are not meant to walk beside you in this season. Chaos is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's subtle. It creeps in through obligations you never agreed to, roles you were never supposed to fill, and emotional burdens you quietly accepted for the sake of keeping the peace. Chaos can look like constantly managing other people's feelings, being the peacemaker in a storm that was never yours, shrinking your voice so others don't feel small, or silencing your dreams to avoid confrontation. And the longer you carry their chaos, the harder it becomes to hear the voice of God clearly. Your calling requires clarity. It requires focus, discipline, and space to breathe. The vision God has given you cannot be fulfilled in an environment of confusion. The anointing on your life cannot flourish in toxicity. The gifts you've been given cannot be sharpened if your time and energy are constantly being drained by drama that has nothing to do with your destiny. There is a difference between compassion and codependency, between support and sacrifice of self. And when you begin to understand that difference, you also begin to understand your limits. There is a cost to your calling, yes, but it's not supposed to cost you your peace. It's not supposed to cost you your mind, your health, or your identity. God never asked you to carry someone else's storm while trying to build what He placed in your spirit. He called you to be faithful, not to be a fixer. He called you to love, not to lose yourself in the chaos of someone else's unhealed wounds. Some of the chaos you are carrying is keeping you stuck, not because you lack strength, but because you're pouring your strength into what isn't yours to solve. You've been trying to prove you can handle it all, trying to be everything to everyone. But God is calling you to set down the things He never placed in your hands. Just because you love someone doesn't mean you are responsible for their healing. Just because you care doesn't mean you must carry. When you try to carry both your calling and their chaos, you will find yourself weary and misaligned. You'll begin to lose sight of who you are and where you're going. And slowly, almost without realizing it, your life becomes a response to their crisis instead of a reflection of your purpose. You were not created to be a dumping ground for dysfunction. You were not created to abandon your assignment for the sake of making everyone else comfortable. To walk in your calling requires boundaries. It requires discernment. It requires the willingness to say, "This is not mine to carry." It requires the strength to choose purpose over guilt, peace over pleasing, and growth over familiarity. The cows may be loud, but the voice of God is still small and steady, and you cannot hear it when you are drowning in noise. But with your heart, there is nothing noble about abandoning your calling to clean up what others refuse to deal with. There is nothing holy about living in a constant state of survival because you've allowed their mess to become your mission. When God calls you higher, He also calls you to travel lighter. And that means laying down what was never yours to begin with. The presence of God is found in the now, not the past. There is something deeply human about clinging to what was. We replay memories, rehearse conversations, relive moments that no longer exist. We look backward, hoping to find comfort in what once was familiar. But the Spirit of God does not dwell in the places we refuse to leave. He is not confined to the past we cannot seem to release. His presence is always in the present, in the now, waiting for us to notice him where we are, not where we were. The past has a way of wrapping itself around the heart like a vine, growing quietly and steadily until we cannot see beyond it. We hold on to people, to pain, to places that felt like home. We hold on to the version of ourselves that fit into those old places. And while there is nothing wrong with remembering, there is danger in worshipping the past. There is danger in allowing yesterday to define today. Because when we are consumed by what has been, we miss what is. The Spirit moves freely, not according to our longing, but according to truth. And truth is that God is here right now in this moment, not only in the sanctuary of your past victories, but in the stillness of your present becoming. His presence is not something you left behind. It is something you are invited to encounter again and again, with fresh eyes, a soft heart, and an open spirit. He is not limited by what you lost. He is not tied to who you used to be. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But he meets you in the today. There are moments we spend asking where he went, when in truth, we are the ones who drifted. Into nostalgia, into regret, into bitterness about what didn't work out the way we thought it would. But his presence hasn't disappeared. It is still and quiet, waiting for us to release the grip on what was, so that we can embrace what is. The presence of God does not shout. It does not chase. It waits. It remains. And it is most often found in the ordinary rhythms of right now. When we search for God in the rearview mirror, we end up worshipping a memory. We long for the days when things were simple, when we felt close to him, when we had answers. But the truth is, God isn't calling you back. He's calling you deeper. He is not interested in taking you to who you used to be. He is forming something new in you, something that cannot be born in the shadows of yesterday. You cannot step into the fullness of now while dragging the weight of then. There is a sacred invitation in this very moment, to pause, to breathe, to look around and ask, where is God meeting me today? Maybe it's in the silence you've been trying to avoid. Maybe it's in the discomfort of growth. Maybe it's in the quiet surrender that comes when you stop striving to recreate the past and simply receive the present. Whatever it looks like, his presence is here. And the more you resist the temptation to dwell in what was, the more you begin to notice him in what is. This moment is holy, not because it looks like what you expected, not because it feels comfortable or familiar, but because God is in it. The miracle is not always in the restoration of the past. Sometimes the miracle is in the awareness that this moment, this breath, this step, this unfolding, is sacred ground, and it cannot be touched until you stop looking behind you. You were never meant to live anchored to the past. You were made to move, to follow, to be led by the Spirit in real time. Divine love never asks you to lose yourself. There is a kind of love that flows from heaven, pure and holy, untainted by fear, free of manipulation. It does not come to control you or confine you. It comes to remind you of who you are. Divine love always points you back to the one who created you. And in doing so, it points you back to yourself. Not the version you've molded to please others. Not the mask you wear to survive, but the true, God-breathed self beneath all the layers. Divine love sees that self and says, you are still worthy. You are still whole. You are still mine. But how easily we settle for lesser loves. Loves that demand we change just to be chosen. Loves that only embrace us when we shrink small enough to fit into someone else's comfort. Loves that confuse silence with peace and sacrifice with submission. And slowly, often without realizing it, we begin to disappear. We mute our voice. We dull our light. We compromise the calling placed on our lives just to stay accepted, included, loved. That is not divine love. That is bondage dressed in the disguise of belonging. The love of God will never ask you to betray the person he is shaping you to be. It will never pressure you to abandon your values, your convictions, or your spiritual clarity just to maintain a relationship or a connection. If it costs you your soul to keep it, it was never love to begin with. The Spirit of God never calls you into something that requires you to dim your light or surrender your identity. He does not author confusion. He does not bless what breaks you. Love that comes from God bears the fruit of freedom, not fear. Sometimes we hold on to people or places because they once felt like home. But if that home no longer allows you to breathe, it is no longer safe. If that connection requires you to constantly explain, defend, or prove your worth, it is not rooted in love. It is rooted in insecurity. Divine love never puts you on trial. It never makes you feel like you must earn your place. It never uses your past against you. It covers, it lifts, it restores, it speaks life. You were not created to disappear inside someone else's needs, wounds, or expectations. You were not made to carry the weight of someone's healing while neglecting your own. Real love, God's love, moves through people in a way that nourishes, not drains. It reminds you that your presence is not too much, your voice is not too loud, your dreams are not too big. Divine love celebrates growth, not just comfort. It invites transformation, not control. When you begin to understand this, your spirit starts to reject anything that requires your extinction. You begin to see clearly. You begin to feel the grief of all the places where you had to go missing in order to feel loved. And yet, even in that grief, there is a holy awakening. You do not have to be less to be loved well. You do not have to abandon yourself to be accepted. You do not have to perform to belong. God's love restores your dignity. It reminds you of your value. It draws you into alignment, not into apology. It doesn't force you into spaces where you must hustle for affection or compete for attention. Divine love says, you belong because I made you. You are enough because I formed you. You are worthy because I breathed into you. This kind of love does not tear you down. It builds you up until you can stand again, speak again, believe again. Divine love will never require you to forget who you are. It will never ask you to stay small to keep others comfortable. It will never silence the truth rising up inside you. It may challenge you to grow, to forgive, to heal, but it will never ask you to disappear. Peace is not passive. It's power under control. There is a kind of peace that the world cannot offer, and the world cannot take away. It's not the peace that comes from circumstances being easy or people behaving how you want. It's not the fragile stillness that exists only when everything goes according to plan. This peace, true peace, divine peace, is something different. It's strong, it's steady. It's a river that runs deep beneath the surface, undisturbed by the waves crashing above. And it is not born from ignoring reality, but from being every emotion wants to rage. It is choosing stillness when everything in you wants to retaliate. That is not weakness. That is restraint. That is strength. Peace is power under control. It is what keeps you from reacting in fear, from speaking in anger, from making decisions out of desperation. It is what allows you to move wisely, speak clearly, and love fully even when things are hard. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of God in the midst of it. You can walk through a fire and not be burned when peace goes before you. You can be surrounded by noise and not lose your mind when peace lives within you. It is the anchor that holds when everything else is shaking. There are people who will try to pull you out of that place. People who feed on drama, who are uncomfortable with calm, who want you to match their dysfunction. And you must be wise enough to discern the difference between what needs your voice and what simply wants your energy. Not every storm deserves your response. Not every battle is assigned to you. There is power in silence. There is strength in stillness. There is a divine confidence in the one who knows how to protect their peace. Keeping your peace doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're not aware. It means you've made a holy decision to stay grounded, to stay connected to the Spirit of God, to not allow your joy, your focus, your direction to be hijacked by distraction. There is a time to speak, and there is a time to remain still. There is a time to step forward, and a time to let the Lord fight your battle. Peace knows the difference. Peace doesn't rush. Peace doesn't panic. Peace knows when to move and when to rest. That's why it is power. When you begin to walk in peace, it confuses those who expect you to crumble. It silences those who only understand chaos. It unsettles those who thrive on reaction. But you are not here to prove your strength by matching other people's madness. You are here to prove your strength by abiding in the presence of the one who calms every storm. Peace is your inheritance. It's not something you earn. It's something you protect. It's something you cultivate. And it is evidence, not of passivity, but of maturity, of authority, of trust. Peace guards your heart like armor. It surrounds your mind like a fortress. It whispers to your soul when the world gets loud. It says, you don't have to be shaken. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to fix everything or fight everyone. You just have to be still and know that He is God. Know that you are held. Know that peace is not a luxury but a promise. A powerful, holy. Elevation often requires separation. There is a sacred tension that comes when God begins to lift you into a higher place. It's not always loud. It's not always announced. Sometimes it starts with a subtle shift, a discontent with where you are, a stirring in your spirit, a sense that something familiar no longer fits. It's in these moments that the Spirit begins to separate you, not as punishment but as preparation. Because where God is taking you, not everyone can follow. And what He's building in you, not everyone will understand. Separation is not rejection, it's refinement. It's God peeling away what cannot remain attached to your destiny. It's Him removing the distractions, the dependencies, the attachments that have become comfortable but are now a hindrance. You may try to hold on, out of love, out of loyalty, out of fear, but God knows what you cannot yet see. He knows who and what would become weight if brought into the next season. He knows what would delay you, derail you, or diminish what He's trying to cultivate within you. And in His mercy, He begins to separate. This kind of separation can be painful. It might look like friends growing distant, doors closing, silence where there used to be constant chatter. It may feel like isolation, like being hidden, like everything is being stripped away. But it is in this very place, this place of aloneness, that God begins to reveal Himself more clearly. Elevation requires a quieting of the noise. It requires focus. It requires you to discern His voice above every other voice that once had influence over you. The higher you go, the less weight you can carry. In the natural, when a balloon rises, it must release what's heavy, and spiritually it's no different. God is calling you upward, into deeper purpose, into greater clarity, into wider influence. But He will not allow you to ascend while tethered to what keeps you grounded in old mindsets, relationships, and environments that no longer align with where He's leading you. Separation is not about superiority, it's about stewardship. You are stewarding a calling, a mantle, a mission, and that requires discernment about what you allow into your inner circle. Sometimes the very people you're trying to bring with you are the ones who would talk you out of the mountain altogether, not out of malice but out of misunderstanding. They don't see what you see. They're not hearing what you hear. They're not burdened by what you carry. And when you try to drag people into places they were never called to go, you risk compromising your own assignment. You were never called to convince others of your calling. You were called to walk in it. Separation can feel like loss, but it is actually alignment. It is God aligning your life with His vision, not your comfort. It is the divine pruning that comes before the bloom. The cutting away is necessary for the fruit to multiply. And when you begin to see it through the lens of obedience, you realize that letting go is not failure, it is faith. It is trusting that the same God who called you out will sustain you as He lifts you up. You may be walking through a season where everything familiar is fading, where connections are dissolving, where you feel misunderstood, even alone. But look again, you are not being abandoned, you are being anointed. God sets apart before He sets above. He draws you away not to punish you, but to pour into you. He separates you to sanctify you. And in this sacred separation, something is being birthed in you that could not be formed in the crowd, that could not be developed in comfort, that could not be heard in the noise. Healing doesn't always come with closure. There is a kind of healing that slips in quietly, not with answers, not with explanations, but with peace. It comes not because everything is resolved, not because the apology finally arrived, not because the broken things were fixed, but because your soul finally surrendered the need to understand. Healing is not always a neat process. It doesn't always wrap itself in clarity or bow out with a satisfying conclusion. Sometimes healing begins in the silence of unanswered questions, in the ache of things left undone, in the grief of stories that ended before they felt complete. We are conditioned to believe that in order to heal, we need closure, that someone must explain, that someone must return, that someone must make right what was made wrong. But real healing is not that dependent. It is not tied to the willingness of another to see, to admit, to change. It is not delayed by someone else's refusal to take accountability. Healing comes when you choose to no longer keep your heart hostage to what may never come. It comes when you release the outcome, when you stop rehearsing what should have been and start living in what is. There are wounds that will never make sense, betrayals that came out of nowhere, goodbyes that were never spoken. There are moments that left you breathless, decisions that shattered your trust, people who walked away like you meant nothing. And while the pain was real, the healing does not have to wait for them to return and make it right. Healing can happen in the middle of unanswered prayers. It can unfold in the presence of mystery. It can bloom where you thought only brokenness could remain. There's a divine mercy in not knowing sometimes. Because if you knew every reason why they left, why it ended, why it hurt so deeply, it might not bring peace. It might only bring more pain. Sometimes God protects you from the details. He shields you from explanations that would only reopen the wound. And so instead, He gives you grace to move forward without them. He gives you strength to walk with a limp but still walk. He gives you the ability to breathe again, laugh again, trust again, even without the clarity you thought you needed. Healing without closure is holy work. It requires trust. It requires you to let go of the desire to fix what cannot be fixed, to stop chasing the past for justice, and to start leaning into the present for joy. It means choosing to stop asking why and instead asking how. How can I rise from this? How can I carry the lesson, but leave the weight? How can I live with open hands when my heart still remembers the closing door? These are the questions that healing begins to answer, slowly, quietly, deeply. You do not need closure to be whole. You do not need to understand the reason to experience release. Sometimes closure becomes a cage, a lie that says you cannot move on until they come back, until they say the words, until they see what they did. But you are not waiting anymore. You are healing because God said it's time. You are healing because there is more ahead than behind. You are healing because your heart deserves to breathe, not because they deserve your forgiveness. Healing without closure is not incomplete. It is sacred. It is choosing to trust the healer more than the history. It is allowing God to write the rest of the story without needing to rewrite what's already been written. And in time, what once felt like an open wound becomes a place of wisdom. What once held pain becomes a well of compassion. What once needed closure becomes a testimony that you did not need what you thought you did in order to rise. Beloved, in all these things, letting go, standing in stillness, walking through separation, choosing peace, embracing healing without answers. This is the work of the Spirit within you. Not by might, not by power, but by the breath of God calling you deeper, higher, truer. You were never meant to carry dead weight in the name of loyalty, never meant to trade your identity for someone else's comfort, never meant to remain bound by what God has already called you out of. This is your hour to focus, not on who left, not on what broke, but on who you are becoming. Let them go, not in bitterness, but in freedom. Let them go, not to prove anything, but because you are finally choosing to live. Let them go, because the hand of the Lord is upon you, and He is doing a new thing, not behind you, but before you. And it begins now with you.